Before Dr. Muaz starts, I would like to welcome you all here. Thank you very much for coming despite the climatic change or the weather change. It was all right this morning and then began to rain. So thank you for coming, making all the effort. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting talk by Dr. Muaz. As far as I'm concerned, the British consolidated most of the borders of Sudan. And now, unfortunately, since 2011, things have changed. The South went independence, and now Darfur saying we are independent. So the borders are going to be in turmoil for the foreseeable future. And Muaz will reflect on Halai as well as the Fashaga. And perhaps the Southern Sudanese kindly asked me that I should ask you about ABA, if you could refer to it. First, we have Lamar, please. She's on behalf of the Jalia Sudania here.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are very delighted to welcome you all to this lecture, which addresses a very important topic, addressing the national borders of the Republic of Sudan and the challenges and conflicts associated with it. My name is Lamar Bashir Ahmed, and I am honoured to address you on behalf of the Sudanese Cultural Forum in Oxford, a forum that discusses a current issue and crucial topics and also tries to contribute by proposing solutions in a rational and impartial manner. As the most important rules of this platform are freedom, independence, and transparency of opinions. Distinguished guests, as you all know, many of the world's borders were formed during the colonial era when European powers drew up maps of the African countries. They did this according to their own interests, regardless of the historical and social ties between the peoples of the region. As a result, African countries inherited artificial borders from that period, which is the cause of many subsequent conflicts, resulting in the displacement of armed conflicts and illegal activities along the borders. Sudan is one of the countries most affected by these challenges, given its vast territory, ethnic and racial diversity. Among these challenges is the border overlap with Ethiopia over the Al-Shahi region, as well as the dispute with Egypt over the Halai and Shalatin Triangle. These issues illustrate that borders are not just lines on a map, but are linked directly to national sovereignty, security, and economic development. According to these facts, let us ask a fair and simple question. Shouldn't the former colonial powers, such as the UK, France, etc., contribute to the resolution of these disputes, at least by providing all the documents and records they held in their possession? Because the accurate border doesn't only achieve stability and sovereignty, but also opens up prospects for development and enhances opportunities for cooperation among the peoples of the region. We are very honoured today to host Dr. Muaz Ahmed Tungo, the former chairman of the Sudanese National Border Commission 2018 to 2023, and also the current lecturer at the University of Khartoum in International Law and Human Rights. Welcoming him to discuss this vital topic in depth and detail based on his practical and scientific experience and expertise. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Al-Shahi at the Sudanese Programme and the Middle East Centre at Oxford University for hosting this lecture, also for the important collaboration, which is very appreciated. Thank you all for listening. I'll now pass it over.
Thank you, Lamar. And this event is a collaboration with the Jalia Sudania, the Sudan Cultural Forum in Oxford, and the Sudanese Programme, as well as the Middle East Centre. Now we turn to Dr. Lamar. Lamar has said, something about his background. So Muaz, I'll give you for about an hour maximum, in order that I will allow you some time to ask questions or make any comments on the border of Sudan. Okay.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I am really very honored to be here, and thank you, Dr. Ahmed Al-Shahi and the Sudanese community on Oxford to invite me to share with you some highlights of the Sudan-Egypt boundary and also Sudan-Ethiopia boundary. The time is short, so I am going to really be brief on the general things and give some highlights on the issues that are pertinent to the dispute between Sudan and Egypt. My lecture is not fully academic, but it's also very interesting to academics because it's going to contain some pertinent, important information for researchers to actually to make an insight on the views of the two countries on the boundary line between them. As the presenter stated that the boundaries of Africa have been actually delineated or demarcated in many times by the colonial powers post 1885 Berlin conference, Scramble for Africa, where they divided Africa between them. But however, when I am speaking about Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia, I am speaking about pre-colonial era or civilizations that really dated long, or 1,000 years before the colonial period. And there existed about 3 different or 4 different kingdoms and empires in this area, whether it is the Sudanese Kush and Nubian kingdom, or the Ethiopian Abyssinia, or even the Egyptian. So they predated the colonial era by thousands of years, and there must be a boundary between them. And that is what I am going to disclose here. There are elements of boundaries even 1,000 years or even 7,000 years before colonial period between these entities, although they were not recognized or there was no international law at that time. But anyway, there was a recognition of a boundaries. Before I actually go on about the boundaries, I think people get confused always about some terminology in boundaries, whether it is delimitation or demarcation. So the delimitation of boundary is the description of the boundary in a text, in a legal text that has predated the boundaries. And the demarcation is the marking of the boundary on the ground by pillars and then issued in a maps. And that is very important because especially for us to identify before it, and there are other terminologies like the effectivité administrative, which are what you call decrees and administrative orders that actually pertain to the issue of the boundary or controlling of a territory between 2 administrative areas. And when these 2 administrative areas become as independent countries, then that administrative order assumes international legal instrument and become like a treaty or agreement that describes the boundary, and it will be since at the time of the independence of these areas. And this is apparent even in Africa from the ICJ ruling of Burkina Faso and Mali, which were 2 provinces of France when they gained independence. And that ruling of 1994 described this, and since then, it became clear the usage of it. Okay, as for Sudan and Egypt, many will be talking about it later. Many start in their talk about Sudan boundaries about 1899 agreement between Britain and Egypt as the agreement for the boundaries between them. But here I am going to contest whether that is right or even it is legally sound to call it as a boundary agreement that describes a boundary. And before I go to Sudan, let us see what are the boundaries of Egypt, which is a very important question. What are the boundaries of Egypt before Sudan was born? Because when we're talking about Sudan, Egypt was a province or a region of the Ottoman Empire, at least since 1841 as semi-autonomous. But even before that, it was a province of the Ottoman Empire. What were the boundaries of Egypt? Because many people really neglect this issue of where the boundaries of Egypt even before 1899. They only ask Sudan boundary with Egypt is born in 1889, but later I will talk about even further dates in history. At least in 1841 February, I think it is 8th of February, the Ottoman Empire issued what you call a firman, which is a legal, an order, a law or a legal text accompanied by a map. And that map gave that firman gave Muhammad Ali Pasha the right to be a governor, to be the governor of Egypt for all his life, and then this governorship will be inherited by his descendants after him. In that, it accompanied with a map, and that map shows the boundary of Sudan and Egypt. At that time, it was not called Sudan, but it called Nubia. And the Nubian boundary extend in the mid of the Nile to Aswan. And on the west, even north of Aswan, excluding the oasis of Dakhla and Kharja, which belongs to another entity I will be talking about later. On the eastern side, on the boundary was in the Gulf of Banias, some, I think, 92 kilometers north of Shalatin. North of Shalatin, and that is the boundary of that eastern part of Sudan with Egypt. This is declared as a firman, and it's very important instrument when you are talking about boundary making or boundary legal instruments. Is the highest map that can acquire the full legal authority is the map that is being issued with the law, with an arrêt or a firman like this or a decree. And then that it assumes the finality of the map. So if I have this map here, sorry I couldn't show it there, but the map is there. But even before that, in 1829, the government of the Ottoman Empire asked a French company to issue a map on its behalf on the boundaries of Egypt. And it is exactly the same as the one in the Firma. And that is also published in France, and it is still there. So in that map, I can say, generally, from the east, and even Sinai Peninsula is not part of Egypt. At that time, it's part of Hijaz, which is Saudi Arabia right now. So all this time, it was never. And only Sinai was only transferred to Egypt in 1914. Only, but amazingly, from 1899 or 900, Sinai was part of Sudan, was governed by Sudan by Al-Hakim Al-Am, the Governor General in Sudan. And that is why when there was a dispute in Taba, they could not find any papers because the boundary between Ottoman authorities in Palestine and Sinai was done under the Sudan administrative issues. But this saying, nobody speaks about it. It's been buried, but it is there. That is why Egypt got Taba in the arbitration. When I come to Bernice, and the Bernice is now in Egypt, from Bernice to Sawakin to even Musawa, all these were part of Hijaz. It's not part of Sudan, it's not part of Egypt, it is not part of anybody. So nobody says Sawakin or Halaib or Aizab was part of Egypt. It was part of Saudi Arabia or Hijaz, and it was governed by the Ottoman province of Jeddah. So all the papers there, if you are looking for papers for Sawakin, Aizab, and all this area, Bernice, you can only find it in Jeddah. Within that, until 1874 or 1876, when it was annexed with Sudan. So that was the first, so only 5 or less than 10 years before the Mahdi's revolution, that the eastern coast of Sudan was re-annexed with Sudan. So, and through other agreements, as I will talk, even in 1899, it was then. Okay. Then also, if we try to examine the other international legal instruments that we are talking about, most Egyptians and even Sudanese and even others who are talking about the Sudan boundaries, they talk about the agreement of 1899 that describes the boundaries of Sudan as at the 22nd parallel north of Halfa, and then it is a straight line. But as I said, there was a history, an illegal history even before that. You cannot start history from 1899. But even if when you talk about the agreement between Britain and Egypt, it is misleading. There was no agreement, as we understand it today, between Britain and Egypt in 1899 to determine the boundaries of Sudan and Egypt. That is not right. First of all, if you look into the British treaty series, you will not find that agreement there. And when I looked there, I couldn't find it. I was wondering why. So I started reading before that. And then I came across the draft of that agreement. But why I went there also, because there was some discrepancy in the documents I found when I went in my research to look at this agreement as published. As a lawyer, I went to see the text, the legal text published in the Gazette. So in the first Gazette of the government of the Sudan, issued on 8th of March 1899, you will find this 1899 agreement published there. In English, it says agreement. In Arabic, it doesn't say ittifaqiyya. It says wifaq. And I wondered why it is here and there. Then I remembered one thing, that there was an advisory opinion of the ICJ on the Western Sahara, which explained that the agreements done by the colonial powers with African chiefs during the scramble for Africa are not covered by international law, and they are not international legal instruments. And that's why in Arabic it was said wifaq. It's not agreement. But then I went to read the archive. I found that the Turkey or the Ottoman complained to Britain that how come you sign an agreement with a vassal state, which is a part of what do you call it, local government of the Ottoman Empire. And the British government's response was very clear. They stated that they never signed an international agreement with the Khidif. And that is why when I was reading also, I found that when Lord Cromer sent the draft agreement to Lord Salisbury replied to him that he advised him, don't name it treaty or a convention, because we are not signing it with a sovereign. So Lord Cromer named it as an agreement which he does not or was not accepted as a legal instrument under international law at that time. That is all not after 1945, the word agreement became an international instrument. But before that, it was not. It was not international instrument. Then I also looked into the reasons and even the clear text. I did not see a text that described the boundary. In that 1899, it describes Sudan as the area south of parallel 22. And I said to myself, why it is specifically South 22, while it is originally, even it is on the 24th or even 24th, 50, or 30 above Aswan. Then I found a very a telegram from Lord Cromer to Lord Salisbury, explaining that the irrigation system built by Muhammad Ali Pasha for Egypt was becoming insufficient. And there is a need to build a dam in Egypt. And that he actually asked some British engineers to look at the best place to build a dam in Egypt. And in that agreement. It is there in Kew Gardens. If anybody want to look at it, they can find all these documents I'm talking about here in London, in the British Archive. And that there was no place to build a dam in Egypt. The nearest place to build a dam lies in the Nubian, in the land of Nubia. And that also in another document, that the extent of the lake behind that dam will extend to parallel 22. Hence, there was this mention and description of the Sudan. It's not the boundaries of Sudan, but the Sudan. But even after that, there are some areas of Sudan where north of parallel 22. Mostly the Egyptians refer to what you call to the decisions of the Minister of Interior, Mustafa Fahmi, who actually gave back part of the areas to Sudan as a decision from the Minister of Interior. But in fact, if you looked in Egypt from 1874 until 1922, all prime ministers in Egypt were the ministers of Interior. So they have two hats, all of them. So Mustafa Fahmi, when they refer to him as the Minister of Interior, that is not 100% correct. He is, what do you call it? Rais Majlis al-Nuzar. He is the Prime Minister of Egypt and the Minister of Interior. And he was in charge of the provinces of Egypt. So he issued a decree giving back some areas to Sudan or assuring that the areas remain in Sudan. It is not giving back. They were never Egyptian to give back, even in the West, because even when you go back to 1899, that line description did not apply to Sawakin and the Red Sea, because they came back in 1899 itself and had another agreement about Sawakin province in July. So when they're talking about 1899, there are two different distinct agreements. One of them is only about the north in Nubia, and the other one is about, and the decision, that's why there are two different decisions. One in 1899, March 1899, the other one that concerning Faras and Adindan and all this area, and the other one was in 1902, because at that time the dam issue was completed. Then they turned, but even in that, if you read the file, it says that the قانون العربان الصادر في مصر في 1892. So the law that applies to the nomads in Egypt in 1892 was never applied to the people in the Halai Baba Ramat area. Never. And that is why they will leave them with Sudan. So the array itself, if you read it was not giving Egyptian land to Sudan, but confirming that that area remains in Sudan. And these two legal documents issued and also published in the Egyptian Gazette, they stopped Egypt from claiming beyond them, not Sudan. This can create trouble because Sudan never intervened anywhere and was not there. And even Britain never intervened. So it is all Egypt who did all this. But however, when I speak about it, there are a lot of other even prehistory documents, like if you read the history of Ibn Battuta, remember he wanted to go to Hajj through Aizab, through Aizab. Aizab is next to Halayb. Okay? And then he reported that when he reached Aizab, he found that the Amir there, Bashar, burned all the ships there and refused any to leave to Jeddah. So he said he went back to Egypt to go to Hajj through Egypt. So he went through Sinai to the Hajj. Even when Ibn Battuta, it was not under the control of Egypt at all. And there was no history of it anywhere, of any Egyptian pharaohs or so and so controlling. In fact, there was a pharaoh called Samna, had a pillar boundary in the island of the elephants, north west of Aswan. Where he put that was the boundary of Nubians, of Kushites. And then north of it, they have no area or no land beyond that. And that is historically it is there, and they cannot do it. Even when we go to the historians like Brown and Tunisi, when they visited Darfur, Darfur used to extend to the oasis of Dakhla and Kharja. And right there, next to Cairo, the soldiers of the Sultan of Darfur were there, and they received these historians and they led them to Al-Fashir there. So in all these areas, the area of Sudan is there. There, before 1899, there were no Nubians at all in Egypt. All Nubians are in Nubia, and they were never in Egypt at all. But even during the Mahdist regime, there was a province, two provinces that survived the Mahdism, by the way. Nobody knows about them. One of them is Sawakin. He was never under the Mahdist. Second province was the northern province, which lies from Halfa to Aswan. And this remained independent and reporting direct to the Ottoman in Istanbul, not through Egypt, both of them. Until the British sent Kitchener to invade this area. Again, when you read the agreement of 1899, just to ensure that I clarify something, in the response of Britain, they said everything we did was in accordance with our bilateral treaty with the Ottoman Sultan. The treaties that you can find in the British treaty series is 1885 and 18 87. And both treaties are concerning Egypt and Sudan, whereby the Ottoman Empire allowed and gave permission to the British to revitalize the economy of Egypt and to re-annex Sudan back to the Ottoman sovereignty. And it is clear there, if you read them, and then you read this agreement, you know that these are the legally binding agreements Britain not to sign any agreement with Egypt, and also that Egypt is not an independent state. That is also explanation that is needed. I think also just to move, Egyptian also they are claiming that that the only instrument is the 1899 agreement. But if you go to the records of the Security Council in 1947 and 48, you will find Al-Naqrashi Basha and also the Al-Nahas Basha. They declared that the 1899 was never an agreement, and also Egypt never approved it or endorsed it. Then when we move again in 1952, we find the first Egyptian parliament, it passed a resolution declaring that the 1899 agreement as null and void. Then where is the agreement that describes the boundary? If you go back, you will find the only agreement that describes the boundary is the 1953 agreement between Egypt and Britain, whereby it was declared and prepared Sudan for self-determination. And then the UN and the maps and the constituencies for the election, these are the instruments that are really important for the boundary. All the rest of it is none and void. So in accordance with the 1899 and also the work of the Election Commission, the United Nations Election Commission, and the results of it, Sudan became an independent. And that is the only agreement on the only internationally legally binding instrument that can even be useful in any litigation or arbitration. The rest of it is just political or social talk, nothing else, nothing, and they have no legal power at all. We go back just to make sure, also about, I talked in the presentation actually about the Abu Ramad and also the area, the new sultanate which appeared about 5-6 years ago, about the area that the Egyptians, they refused to control it, and it was declared as a new government, a new territory. I don't know who recognized this territory, but most of the people who visit that territory, they come through Egypt. It's not accepted by the African Union or the UN, and it can never be accepted because the area is there is no terra nullius. There is no terra nullius area anywhere in Africa at all. So if it is Egypt, they don't want it, they can give it away, but they cannot declare it terra nullius. these are the main issues about the boundary.
Ethiopia.
Okay.
Yeah. So we don't. But one thing I think our audience say, what happens to Halai now?
Al-Shahi is under occupation. Legally, it is under occupation. If the Egyptians they really have any legal rights, they can go to arbitration or even ICJ, not by force. Because Sudan, when they first asserted their right there, Sudan complained to the Security Council in 28th of February 1958. But the Egyptians, they didn't want anything but to have it by force. Now, especially after 2011 or 2014, they really tried to change the demography, to change the society, to change everything. And this is an occupation. It is no difference from any other occupation. If they have a right, okay, we are brothers, we are neighbors, we can go to the court, and then the court give whoever, if you have right, even brothers, they go to court to divide the inheritance. Okay, so we can go to the court to determine who has that right. But saying that we have that right, I mean, even if you go, I looked at even all the atlases of Egypt, okay? Before 1991, you will not see Alai or Shalatin or part of Egypt, never. And also, even in their school curricula, you will never see that there was a claim about this. So even their own deed since independence is against them. Egypt was a member of the League of Nations. It is it is also the area did not include Halai at all. And it is one of the countries that actually participated in drafting the the United Nations chapter in San Francisco. And it is mapped an area never included Halai at that time. And when Sudan was admitted to the UN, Egypt never complained about including Halai or Nutu Wadi Halfa into the Wadi Halfa salient into Sudan. And also, I mentioned before, there was a United Nations Electoral Commission, which actually approved all the electoral constituencies. There was a member from representing Egyptian government in that. He never complained. He never had any reservation or any other thing, any complaint about it.
When was it Halai occupied by the Egyptian force?
Yeah, 1996, 95.
It's very recent.
But that was even not full occupation. But it increased from 2014. 2014 up to now, it increased. There are some military presence of Sudan there, but it's been under siege. They are living there under siege for the past 20 years. They are not being moved, and they are still there in Halai.
The population?
Huh?
Population?
The population or the distance, amazingly, Egypt went to arbitration for Taba to acquire or to prove that he has the right for 1,000 meters. 1,000 meters. And the distance of Halaib is 22 or 21,000 kilometers. So which one is which one deserves really arbitration or litigation? I mean, this is with its population, and also the population have been part of Sudan all these centuries. We moved to Spashaga because
to Ethiopia because of time.
Okay. Spashaga and Sudan and Ethiopia boundary is also a long history of a boundary, moving boundaries actually, especially with Arctic part of Ethiopia or Abyssinia, and but there existed a boundary generally known in at least in 1800s that the Ethiopians, they live in the highlands and the Sudanese are in the lowlands, with the exception of some parts. For example, part of Bani Shangol are part of Sudan, but they are in the highlands as well. But now they are in Ethiopia. When the British, first of all, there are a lot of talks and claims, unofficially, by the way, I will say, whatever people talk about, there is no boundary dispute between the government of Ethiopia and the government of Sudan. By the way, just to clear things, all the talks is outside. But the government to government, there is no dispute about the boundary pillars or the boundary running where it is. Everybody knows. But some people from here and there, for political reasons, they wanted to claim that they have part in Fashaga. But that is, to my knowledge, and I have been part of this issue for a long time, it is not official stance of the Ethiopian government. It is not official stance of the technical Ethiopians at all to dispute where the boundary pillars are. Again, the boundary between Sudan and Ethiopia have been delimited in 1900 and then re-delimited in 1902. And then it was demarcated in 1903 and then was re-demarcated in 1972. And now we are talking about intensifying the boundary pillars. So we're not talking about demarcation, redemarcation, or delimitation. No, intensifying the existing boundary pillars with more boundary pillars to be clear. So that is as it is. Let us go a little bit, because always boundary studies involve part of history. You have to know the administrative history and the extent of the administrative history to understand where this boundary have been, because boundaries are like humans. Sometimes they always shift and they grow from childhood to so they change. And that changing, you have to track the changes to know exactly where this boundary is. In 1900, the British, when they assumed control of Sudan, they started even in 1899 to talk with the Abyssinian or Ethiopian Menelik emperor for the boundary of Sudan, and also with the Italians next with the boundaries between Sudan and Eritrea right now. So there are two, when we talk about an agreement, 1902 agreement, there are two 1902 agreements. One concerning the boundary between Sudan and Eritrea, One is concerning Sudan and Egypt. So just to make it clear to people not to be confused about, because when it is referred to, it's sometimes confusing. And mainly, it started the negotiation with the British Embassy in Addis Ababa with accepting the current boundaries between Sudan and Ethiopia. And he declared that he is not claiming sovereignty. But we have to remember, but also from the talk between Ethiopians and Sudanese, there are talk that Ethiopia doesn't claim that these boundary agreements are colonial boundaries. When we see that Menelik was a participant in Berlin conference in 1885, Ethiopia was never under colonial power, and it was a colonial power itself. Because Ethiopia or Abyssinia in 1885 is not Ethiopia right now. It was very small at that time, but it is scrambled for African territories like the Europeans when they scrambled for African territories. So if the claim or what you call the pretense of that, it can be rejected as it is a colonial agreement. It doesn't apply to boundary agreements anyway, but also not to Ethiopia, because Ethiopia was a colonial force itself, like Britain or like the Europeans anyway. So it is not itself under colonial influence to say that it was some lands were taken from it. He, in his letter to King Edward, I think, after the starting of the negotiations, requested that Britain look favorably to Ethiopian demands. And that Ethiopia is a poor country with no land for agriculture. So he requests, without claiming of sovereignty, and he stated it, without claiming of sovereignty, that is in his letter, not from me, that he wanted some lands to the west, in the lowlands, for his people to cultivate. Second request, and that is after the drafting of the boundary of 1900. 1900, there was a draft treaty. You can find it in the British archive there. It described the boundary. So he wanted also the town of Matamma, because he claimed that the Matamma, the Emperor Johannes, has been killed by the dervishes in that town and is buried there. And it is not good that he is a sacred person to be left in Sudan. So he wanted that the Matamma is right now. He also asked that Ethiopia is a poor country, and he needed that some concession in Bani Shangol to mine for gold, because he has no resources, no mineral resources. And then Britain accepted this in the draft 1902 agreement. And in that agreement, they describe the boundary as starting from a point at the intersection of River Sitit and River and Khor Hajar, to be the tri-junction between Eritrea, Sudan, and Ethiopia. And then from there, a straight line to Matamma, where he divided Matamma and Galabat and took Matamma into Ethiopia and left Galabat in Sudan. And then straight it went into description as. That description was actually surveyed before by what you call the deputy, what you call the, what's his name? No, it's deputy head of the survey in Sudan. What's his name? It was Major Gwyn. So Major Gwyn, in 1900, he went into a cadastral survey of the area, and he suggested the best areas to make the boundary pillars and the camps and all these things. And then he was in 1902, when the agreement came into force, entered into force, I think it was 28th of October 1902, when he was notified the acceptance of King of Britain of the agreement. And that was the condition of entry into force. I think on the 9th or 8th of July, he sent a letter of recommendation to King Edward. He appraised the work of Major Gwyn as a professional and all this thing, and he gave his trust for him to complete the job.
That's Manlik.
Manlik. That is Emperor Manlik. And then there was, then we started in the demarcation phase in 1903. In 1903, he was accompanied by a group of local heads of tribes from both sides, Ethiopia and Sudan. And then he went there and he I think, identified and made 25 boundary pillars between Sudan and Ethiopia. But he also deviated from the boundary line that was done as described in 1902 agreement. He shifted the boundary with tri-junction from Hajar to Rawiyan. And this shift placed a lot of, I think, Al-Humara, Abdul Rafi, and Abdul Majid, and other areas of Sudan, which were eastern part of Fashaga right now, and added them into Egypt, into Ethiopia. But that is also normal sometimes. Why? He also said that because of the demarcation, the demarcation commission between Italy and Britain, determining the boundary between Eritrea and Sudan, is stopped at the junction of Khor Rawiyan and River Sitit. So he moved this westward, I think more than maybe 50 or 100 kilometers back, and added all this area back to Ethiopia. And he went there. Britain also conceded giving Beni Shangol to Ethiopia under some conditions. One of them is very important condition in Article 4 of the 1902 agreement, that Ethiopia will not be permitted to build any dams or any gorges to arrest the flow of the river of the Blue Nile, unless the British and the Sudanese governments gave their consent, which never happened. And that is it. Then there were some claims area, what you call, in 1947, the emperor's heir to Saron, I think his name was, I think his son or something of Haile Selassie, okay, came and visited London. And in that papers, he admitted and he confirmed to the British government that they accepted without any reservation the boundary pillars done by Menelik. Then again, in 1972, the Ethiopians, also the Ethiopian government, requested from Sudan to concede some more areas, around 4 of the mountains, that instead of the boundary pillars on top of the on the east of the boundary of the mountains area east of it, to be on top, on the summit of the boundary, and Sudan Mansour Khalid accepted that. Then again, Ethiopia gained a lot of area from Sudan, and then the boundary was re-demarcated again. They added another 3 areas apart from the last hill, because there are some villages in there and government institutions inside there, and it was not done because that is a difficulty. And then from 2001 to 2014, I was part of the commission. We never argued, we never disputed the boundary line. Whatever we did is that we actually agreed on 183 more boundary pillars to intensify the boundary. So instead of the boundary pillars after 10 or 5 or 10 kilometers, they become after 2 or 3 kilometers, so that people can see them from one point to another. And where we stopped is that the financing of this stopped, but it was supposed to have happened and intensified in 2015. Unfortunately, there was some political turbulences in Ethiopia that delayed the whole thing. But again, the Ethiopian government reassured Sudan, always official, from their own Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They never disputed the boundary of this. But there are some Amharas who wanted to cultivate in Sudan, and then they wanted to claim that the Fashaga is part of Sudan. Fashaga is not part of Ethiopia at all, and it can never be unless Sudan decided to give them like the ones before. But they have no legal grounds to claim it at all. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Really an excellent lecture, and I'm sure there are lots of questions